Make sure your broader space where right now discuss possible escalator ramifications one thing with the reason is not an adversarial back there's no consider adversary may be more invested when these new board collapse deterrence over 19 early warning signs of natural retaliation launch warning when it boosts guys I see launch warning is red baby handling risk of nuclear warfare whistles over one of us why was that launch warning creates a threat of nuclear war in the scope malfunction unauthorized action or risk keeping it both the early warning would be crucial for deterrence this house everyone even if missile defense or destabilizing the risk to defeat them by putting besides putting South majority which would be destabilizing clarifying escalation thresholds in advance of schizophrenia miscalculated crisis lack of Cold War experience and space preemptive attacks are norms essential phase 14 ambiguity would be open to interpretation resident shorting the causes significant decision makers lean toward worst case interpretation there's rest people risk adversaries have years to develop understanding of ability word on a real world crisis signs of progress these do not squarely address like a mutual understanding reserving attacks in a crisis of particular concern for the US and China engagement by think tanks have begun to disclear both sides harbor mistrust and misperception misrepresentation are hard to resolve building trust a time and disable situation war would only come because of one party truly saw the outcomes of way when each side understand the implication of its action we just strive to build a framework before propaganda provocative imperial stability and earth norms are key to crisis stability building them in advance as Goldilocks for deterrence and signaling escalation threshold safer 17 militaries gain advantages norms highlight abnormal behavior norms form the base of early warning of aggressive actions no behavior contrary to deliberate choice there will be a critical crisis decision making flexibility whether an underreaction overreaction to it could have serious consequences violation enable thresholds and rules of engagement allow militaries to decision norms are ironically enhance freedom when it's needed most because norms support because you're protecting attacks they enable self-defense that requires already developed diplomatic channels and a common vocabulary that only rules the road for space savior solving all 13 the dynamics of deterrence are well understood weapons are less viable there's a need for discussion to develop common language and provide insight of how powers understand concept channels communication have a better chance there's a priority for interaction with leaders are familiar and conservative signals and important subject to misinterpretations based on percent may be smaller even though the escalating word potentially could be high singular understanding signaling can be misread by leaders inclined to worst case analysis false signals can be destabilizing learn what urgent has this episode live around for space signaling testing could be destabilizing if dependence as signal prior notifications and a code of might clarify malicious intent inabilities also entanglement that clarifies hypersonic payloads our team to address entanglement escalation trust has to be improved dialogue between the experts on perspective right opportunity there would be very helpful watching convey mutual vulnerabilities that a political commitment could still help reduce concerns with and take make time or when to discuss entanglement and work cooperative to address escalation we're trying to get explain whether hypersonic weapons could be armed with conventional nuclear and what space assets might be legitimate targets hypersonics because US first strike and Newport even if they're never used by our team when making decisions about whether to respond with their use or we figure out where it's coming from and decide whether you're going to respond and then how are you going to shore all this in a 6 minutes people become more sure they can press time for make people more likely to first strike you can't defend against fitting competition you have to develop command and control into the field of the military that runs risk accident orders versus to weapons runs the risk of weapons being used by terrorists and other possibilities to go launch a warning even one terrorist detonation causes extinction weapon 28 nuclear nations in a really created doom image with 15,000 nuclear weapons free on targets and good main cities one nuclear basket trigger was just one nuclear war could use unimaginable firestorm to go on high altitude would reduce selling for a decade causing drought winter global famine catastrophic impacts for all life students being the US and terrorist organization with nuclear weapon can not be deterred nuclear war is not right mistake of the mistake is very happy because the US and Russia have to keep 900 wars ready to fire minutes with only minutes to value warning one mistake a trigger or disaster runaway nuclear escalation is inevitable that rules the road in space that's key and requires building consensus with Russia and China Pearl 19 status are going to protect our support allies and missile early warning said they enable military first reporting across wide space reporting nuclear in China and operationalize that Russia developing a similar system trying to maybe targeting higher altitude to over safe to warning nuclear has attacks from fears of independent nuclear strike and ability to runaway escalation plus American attempt to use trees is not feasible it has no mechanism for compliance in place to restrict conventional weapons without every country deserve two bills the most important numbers of force treaty warning CNC these maintain feasibility dialogue with China Russia build consensus against attacking the ACs in the US could also explore rules of the road ink map to space while including focus on the safe distance maneuvers in the heavy track not simulating attack launching object or limiting bridges and using accepted signals since relying in terms of intention one can imagine agreement on a similar treaty creating conic norms also miscalculation escalation listener 9 more effective approaches to focus on conics than it would be an interaction of space that could lead to an incident norms leaving on the incidency agreement applying would be again with separate individual invitations into bilateral discussion bilateral would be cumbersome and have less probability of an effective agreement given the multiplicity of interests disparities and differences it would contain the following ensure safety and navigation over has very national space law define concepts to cover all potential opportunities and interference rules the running including business and attack starting use of energy devices would create a protocol for time foreign parties who reported incident prevented from escalating this committee would meet to discuss whether measures are and then to make modification of the agreement would be designed to reduce possibility of incident would go through misunderstanding the agreement would create dialogue to reduce clear misunderstanding the escalating incident would reduce the likelihood incidents to go through mistaken open and avenue of dialogue that may prevent deliberate acts all together advantage to his management Kessler breakdown because of new space collisions Bergani 18 and collisions Bergani 18 obviously in orbit increase exponentially or over 150 million object for a total of 5,000 times the Kessler syndrome is the propagation of range collision space 65% of those 20,000 object results from just standing collision at an average speed 30,000 kilometers per hour even 1 centimeter lost out to destroy satellite debris. One report of the impact today could increase from 3 to 10 times by the end of the decade. Space weapons ensure ablation cascades in key regions that causes war, miscalculating, even decline, driver, 5-4, debris, can destroy satellites, creating cancer, cascade, the resulting field would have disaster effects in the managed cells, adding the economy, damaging sat form, debris fields, debris would escalate, losing coverage to this method. Zone had been destroyed initial seconds ago, bigger retaliation, which could spiral into all about the same time that clean debris are suited for destructing during comedies could be part of the problem. Devices are calling established noise combination driving some peaceful use will be thrown by accidents, the assassination, alcohol, control, control combination drives, debris which analyze the rest, even limited deployment or testing is sufficient to 10. Debris is unlikely to decrease time piece of cause destruction that orbits become crowded. There's a high risk of customer syndrome. The widest damage could generate great quantities of debris just during deployment, and far more if they are used during testing. Further increase the amount of the global economy will collapse. Human society with setback for decades. Rules the road solve growth, disaster response, and food security. Carbon 12 norms strength debris mitigation, avoid collision and air satellites, reverse for economic security, financial transactions, disaster relief, GPS warning, source of for offshore measures, minimize civilian casualty, increase crop yields, and monitor the health of the planet. Satellites are risk from debris code. Can pass our marks from the environment for the dangerous clash of China. Created the worst ever debris field 2007 to reach 10 times the speed of a rifle, decrease in size of the normal push satellite hits, have been developed and debris cloud. These make space corridors unusable. Disasters cause failed states in South Asia war called Minnesota Gate. Disaster heightened dissatisfaction in weak states, sources are exposed, replicating universe, strengthen the big limitations of movement, lead to civil war, regions, arrest, weak economic political capacities, making adaptation place management difficult, disaster cause major damage, and intensive migration, which trigger common disasters, highly weaknesses, triggering interstate common nuke war, Article 15, nuclear terrorism, could escalate into a full-scale nuclear war, the regional experience price towards these conflicts escalating, tailing on particularly high levels of violence, Pakistan, India could become engaged in limited war, tailing nuclear weapons, South Asia, as a flash by bitter animosity impacts on decision-making. Pakistan and India have the capability to pursue wars limited. Fear of operational failures is no surety to the fact that the war would be terminated. Food and security failed states and refugee waves all cause new war. COVID-19, the danger of nuclear company increased to the highest ever. Humanity to be wiped out. It will be the result of atomic conflict. Chemical weapons have frequently been deployed in war, which had ag failure among its driver. Nuclear conflict remains a distinct possibility that Iran and the Middle East panicking. Regimes in Russia, the USA, or France would deploy atomic weapons to eliminate our refugees. Playing the nuclear war is a possible outcome of food crisis would be caught by the CSA as food security is driver of the condition for use of nuclear weapons cascades cause terrestrial weather presence solves the DH-14 satellite imagery is used to maintain peace with an adversary can't have when their armies are moving. That only works if both sides know whether they're being attacked. Missiles can easily be seen from space. Dangerous or attackers will make an accident on the world. Second, should we lose assets in space? President Nuclear would increase our military's ability to react significantly, reduce economic decline, cause of world wars. No buffer started in 2018, dependent on unconventional policies and other financial crises. Increased possibility of large-scale military conflict. Given our crisis combined with the population has been out of control. The world war economic crisis is stressed as deemed to be likely to implement more national means. After 10 leaders conflicts and as in the 37 days later have been living outside of something increasing inequality could cause crisis and other crises leading to military augmentation. And even if unattended, the United States federal government should establish rules for peacetime behavior in space with the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation. Unilateral responses cause war, only creating a broader platform for behavior stops conflict from an inevitable debris response. Packeted 18, the solutions to debris field which help the arrest for dominance and matters, but intent you counter space debris, you counter space debris more so at a time of flux in the world order, power scope, military intent, and legitimate concerns of new race, reflects volatile geopolitics, and political events involving debris are deposed from ravage space. This is not a cascade one single nation can carry. The solution must be diplomacy by the world's powers, leaders, and thinkers, establishing a code of conduct that prohibits reckless behavior and speed of debris creation, installs space arms races, and sat failure. Norms are essential to clarifying deterrence. Prompt 12. Entry is neither feasible nor favorable. Since multi-purpose capabilities can interfere with opportunities and are going to be eliminated banning capabilities in the feasible, dedicated capabilities, and consequential limits will remain untapped. There is an alternative, a new arms or rules regarding incidents disagreement. These could conform executive agreements on treaties. They clarify wrongdoing, facilitate and reduce the likelihood of accidents, misconduct, and collisions. Critics suppose because it can be warfighting and elements are raised traffic regulations. There are speeding limits. Not everyone abides. Would we be safer by intending with traffic regulations? Most importantly, the code is not imposed penalties. Critics fail to clarify how safety can be advanced without rules. There are no rule breakers. The U.S. and China integrate satellites capabilities make a code essential for behavior and facility of order responses.
Did you send out the plan text?
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
You taking prep?
Yeah, can you
Okay, questions.
Yeah.
Advantage 2. Okay, you read a card that demonstrates new space is going to increase the amount of debris created. For example, companies have proposed placing up to 20,000 satellites in the next few years. How could the firm have possibly resolved the debris produced by new satellites?
Because the reason why all of that makes cascades likely is because it's interaction with space being militarized, so the presence of weapons and tests.
How could that possibly be the case? If
The Stratford evidence says that the placement of things alone in space isn't what causes debris. It's the fact that it'll interact with weapons, testing, states will preempt, the placement of satellites, all of that is what causes those cascades.
Our evidence also
Okay,
says
so the Berkeley card that you read says 10
behavior for the movement
I have
of
a question
satellites
about
makes
the
them
impact.
less likely to
The
collide.
Berkeley card you read is about 10 collisions, and you highlighted this test to imply that there will be 10 collisions between debris and satellites, but this card is about debris hitting other debris and 10 collisions between debris. How could that possibly trigger destruction of all satellites, growth, disaster response, etc.?
This thing about 10 collisions I don't understand. However, the card does a statistical analysis and says that the likelihood of debris is likely without things like norms of behavior of satellites.
Okay, now questions about the plan. Prep1 is the only card defining what a code of conduct is. What happens if a country violates the code of conduct?
Well, defining a code of conduct does not matter because that's not a term in the plan.
Or
But there's
peaceful uses.
Yeah, so there's plenty of cards. There's not, like, it's not a treaty, however, the norms generally do a few things if they're violated. One is they spotlight bad behavior. Two, they establish clear, proportionate responses to when, countries do aggressive actions. Three, it allows crisis communication when norms are unintentionally violated.
In terms of peaceful behavior, Russia's in the planets, Russia violated the Vienna documents, INF, New START. Is your position that spotlighting or any sort of these critical masses were sufficient?
I disagree with that listing of arms control agreements that maybe is supposed to say Russia won't follow rules. All of our evidence says that this agreement is uniquely beneficial for them.
What distinguishes this agreement from those which were treaties in the first place?
Huh?
What distinguishes norms from these which were treaties?
So we actually have a really good 1AC card that distinguishes arms control treaties from the AF and says that the reason why those are things Russia and China don't want to participate in is because they require intrusive inspection and verification. Norms in space do not, which is why they need
so we know from this,
consensually
the AF has
agreed
no mechanism of verification and no mechanism
You don't
to
need
sanction or
verification,
punish
which
this.
is the point.
Okay.
Also,
13.
they follow
That's our
EC,
listener card,
which is
by
the
the way.
point. The agreement that we're the most in compliance with is the one in space.
6 off, management, altitude strikes.
I guess it's that time of the year where you gotta come up with snappy new names for the ASAT's advantage and debris advantage.
We try to keep it up.
To be fair, we never named either of those things. We've had Snappy.
Oh, you were always too cool for the.
Do you like domain
Never
control?
not
That was
been
my
too
favorite of
cool.
the year. Or domain stability, yeah. I'd say these are the most honest.
Socialization
so far.
always was weird.
Oh yeah, because that word was not in the 1AC. That was my favorite part.
Yeah,
of that.
it was in a tag.
It's also kind of a
My internet speed not good. Can you put it on this thumb drive? We're going camp style. My Wi-Fi sucks.
Do you have Edge run?
Yeah, but
Is it
it's
like
not.
his-
It's a computer problem, not an internet problem. It might start working in the middle of the debate. Hopefully, in time to send the 2AC.
It should be
but-
titled like speech.
Yeah. Whatever. It's not that
Timestamp.
complicated.
Okay. Got good?
Yep.
Top fidelity arms control limits the number of weapons stored. TCBMs are just in group 9. I'm not equate arms control limits. You can control the weapons with the cooperative threat reduction, including CBMs, codes, and conduct such measures, not substitute for the measures to control arms vote. Negative for limits. TCBMs display the topic. No code. SM3 blocked away. Interceptors will be tested against ICBMs.org. 918. TBM is valid against the ACBM demons intercept ICBMs. D20. NEA has directed the conduct tests to demonstrate the capability to defeat an intercontinental ballistic missile threat against blocked away. MD will test its capability in 2020. Incidents into agreement for outer space prohibit ballistic missile defense. Test against ICBMs. Lynch shows 85. The outer space and other area principle incidents agreement seems applicable to testing of AZ systems in conjunction with the large scale test. The launch of the ballistic missiles could be prohibited if successful. SM3 blocked away interceptor test against ICBMs demonstrate PMD reliability that's key to North Korean nuclear negotiations and deterrence. 196 blocked away and essentially intercepts the intercontinental US test against that threat to building critical data demonstrate while the US could demonstrate blocked away against an ICBM. The US would have the option to deploy US defense to intercept missile threats from North Korea. The no goes but not to dismantle the omen, dismantle their program, resume test and if it sees the negotiate the missile defense area, the diplomacy and the most reliable US defense is more empowered diplomats are to negotiate. Prior to ever successful negotiation, current modernization trends ensure North Korea will first strike Warden and Payne in 1980 to limit no because nuclear it should be through narrow defensive view and North Korea's capability increase that the Korean regime will gain confidence that it can successfully execute strikes against conflict with the US. No go may attempt to initiate should propagate an escalate crisis or risk war with nuclear capabilities allow it to manage a conflict that China prestige, U.S. containment to China's high expanding space cooperation, grand case prestige, autocratic regime, Jewel 19, space provides the U.S. with the opportunity to restore pride and home with the virtues prestige overseas when it comes to space that means strategic back cooperation for going into cooperation with China, the deep cooperation with autocratic powers in space gives out talk to the major point of diplomatic leverage and allows them to push international treaties. There's no reason for the U.S. to give China the same association significant cooperation to be avoided altogether. National prestige project created equal view offered as a wide as of benefits as space China's attempt to establish soft power fails in the status quo. Large scale cooperation solidifies Beijing's broader geopolitical agenda by capturing international support of standing 1970 China's emerging space power global public using only view of the tip of the iceberg. China's eager to profit itself, present itself as a trustworthy space power. Such narrative appeals to develop countries. China's government sees policy as a tool for strengthening the comprehensive national powers, also advancing geostrategic intelligence. China's space strategy emphasis on international collaboration. China's seeking to cement through space diplomacy. China's lack of transparency undermines its own efforts to boost its own powers of space growth may increase China's influence. Space cooperation greenlights China's revisionism. Vision F-15. The China and the U.S. did not engage in space technical cooperation. China's space diplomacy weighed on the American cooperation with space. China cannot be separate from China's division of Earth, where the U.S. wall of space cooperation treated its special role in the play. China's game of the longest rule, and its worldwide CSP. China's not likely to alter invasion and end democracy in Taiwan. Militarize and consolidate the South China Sea, ensure around North Korea, like Pakistan, become nuclear missile states or facilitate wars and advanced cooperation. Space division challenges the more important the U.S. security than space cooperation with China. Miscalculates nuclear collective 16 the U.S. China forward decision away from nuclear chain. The PRC leader possible to prosecute war with the risk of U.S. nuclear attack. U.S. believe the war would depend on the nuclear mismatch perception, increase the possibility of war, and likely would escalate to nuclear weapons of miscommunication, spark a conflict with both governments fighting to stop the Iran DA. The United States federal government should free space cooperation with Russia. U.S. sanctions are successfully stopping Iran's attempts to utilize space for missile prolif. Now we're in 1119. The EAA highlights Iran's space program to be advanced military attack. Iran's development space rocket and trust all right to Iran rocket that's issued value development launch could serve as a test bed for ICBMs. Just by the Iran space program having tech difficulties. The State Department announced it was sanctioning Iran space program. Research institutes proliferating space cooperation is the vital driver of missile prolif. So as you know, date the U.S. and China, Chinese and Russian space cooperation through the U.S. encourages the subsidies to Russian Chinese missile prolif. And the U.S. Russia has been able to transfer all military manner of military tech. As well as it encourages Russian Chinese officials to discount and operate freely and foster disturbing citizens regarding the exportation of accelerated missile prolif. Space cooperation funnel Russian missile tech to Iran. The transfer of the U.S. out of Chinese and Russian providers is the opposite otherwise made underutilized money from the foreign finance missile exports and tangible tech that critical to short timely reliable accurate placement of missile warheads. ICBM prolif causes nuclear war. Act 19 Iran is continuing to develop missiles. The Tehran filed amid escalating tension. Iran rejected Pompeo's destructive defiant tone in response to the withdrawal from the JCPOA and sanctions. Iran does not possess ICBMs that deliver atomic warheads. Rolling back in the ocean means a much greater risk of out of control arms race. They can end with nuclear war that deterrence counterplaying. The United States federal government should announce a campaign to enhance space deterrence capabilities, strengthen passive defense, harden space assets, disperse capabilities, hide satellites, and develop terrestrial backups, distribute U.S. payloads across satellites owned by allied nations, and declare the U.S. will not deny adversaries. The U.S. will deny adversaries the use of space capabilities, hostile to U.S. national interests with non-kinetic weapons. Deterrence by denial strategy solves first strike stability and miscalculation. Morgan 10. Deterrence should be persuading adversaries through the benefits of attack the assets would not make it worth the cost of retribution, make vulnerable more system more resilient demonstrate capabilities, deny adversaries the benefits of attack shutter optics tails against EMP system or subsystem redundancy anti-jam tech to be installed. The efforts should be made to improve satellite maneuverability. We should reduce the benefits of attacking dispersing capability to distribute the payloads across satellites owned by nations friendly entangled increase the international support for the U.S. to punish attackers. Deterrence by punishment solves best. Norms fail. Colby 16. Our opponents need to judge that the demands would be prudent due to military consequences that no need to the threat of force hovering above the demands if there's the hope the adversaries is to abide the belongs to the U.S. as a retaliatory response that are formidable enough to induce or shame, but also moderate enough that dependable believe they will be employed. They're not getting one capabilities limit the conflict, the perspective, advice, and consent counterpart the United States Senate should by 2/3 majority approve a resolution authorizing a self-executing treaty over rules for peacetime behavior in space with the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation. International space cooperation is best conducted through the Article 2 treaty process. Federal routine and international agreements on space should be submitted for the Senate advising consent. Part of the treaty process should not be executive agreement to give the importance of the issue. The U.S. Senate be consulted as part of the advising consent role. Treaty approval is stalled now. Subsequent advice consent otherwise the U.S. negotiating power. Treaty and treaty by government control. Treaty making traditionally proceeds first the president negotiating side and second the Senate gives advice consent. The Senate under reputation brave arbiter treaties effective as the Senate limits U.S. bargaining power with the nation. Believe the U.S. never becomes a party to the treaty under negotiation and given the incentive to listen to U.S. negotiators is greatly reduced. The counterplan is perspective advising consent results in formal treaty and spills over to a meaningful role for the Senate in international negotiations. Solves treaty good luck. Government the Senate could give advice consent prior to the treaty's final negotiations. Perspective advising consent authorizing the Senate to make a treaty that confirms the resolution the president could ratify without further action. The Russia reverse the presumption that the Senate advising consent must follow the president's submissions. Prospective advising consent for the U.S. negotiating power have a greater appeal for the Senate than subsequent advising consent. U.S. congressional negotiating power is key to regulate global military AI. Robert 17. Lethal autonomous weapons can prevent armed conflict could be fought at a greater scale than humans. Comprehensive governments must cooperate. Their autonomous weapons raise the back of review arms. The countries need multilateral rules of negotiating. These are the U.S. Congress has critical role to play in setting a national AI agenda and advocate the multilateral organization of fiduciary Congress should be promoted to a global regime to get to innovation, extinction. Mas 19. The AI is the escalating new strategic opposites between major states and to the battlefield. It matter of time the AI capabilities adversely affect the strategic ability by shifting the offensive defense boundary, eroding nuclear deterrence stability, creating mutual uncertainty, which can stabilize the miscalculation military AI raises the spectrum indirect escalation into flash routine autonomous military systems. The management advantage. 1. Russia, China say no. Creep on 16. with Russia, China, the US, and fine-tuning against that capabilities and competition sees the high ground of spaces under Russia, China, the uninterested in conquer responsible space nations that we framework already exists. China, Russia, the West, projecting that China, Russia, collected limit the code to civilian and commercial space activities, even though military space requirements are the crux of the problem. 2, probability 0.1% chance of collision. Saucer 16. The probability of collision is below the maximum probability of collision over the lifetime of spacecraft. It remains below 1 in 1,000. 3, time frame. Kessler effect 200 years away. Step 17. The so-called Kessler effect is the LEO debris population increases by an average of 30% in the next 200 years. 4, alt cause new space. New Hop 618. New space prescribed global trend to develop cheaper access space. New activity for only worse than the space debris environment. The companies propose placing 20,000 satellites over the next 10 years. Propagate half successful double the number of the payload launched in the next 6 years, and more than 6 times the number of the currently active satellite by any metric. New space represents a fundamental change. 5, Berkeley is about collisions between space debris, not between spacecraft. 6, mitigation is insufficient. Proposal 18 compliance with mitigation will ensure that 90% launch of the compliance provided by the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee will not be enough. The combination of mitigation and remediation measures the need to overcome the negative translate. Both mitigation and remediation causes have been developed to facilitate the reduction of aerospace from space debris. Mitigation can contribute to stabilizing the environment. The mitigation measures only slow the pace of growth and not stop it. The remediation would lower the number of collision. There would be apparent benefit if active removal were performed in conjunction with mitigation. 7, small debris and all cause. Miller 17. Current tracking capabilities objects 10 centimeters or larger below the size of the sample. Anything smaller than track objects still poses here to satellites even if something the size of a giant will do a lot of damage to the altitude strikes. Advantage 1, Russia, China will cheat. Back in 17. There's no evidence of diplomatic framework in the space that gives us assurance of prevention of proper action. The rules of growth will work only for those that seek value and obeying rules are kept until the country feels the need to take contrary steps to support goals, including moving militarily in space. Those that believe that China will follow the rules for the road and only look at China's disdain for responsibility for finding the island making aggressive behavior in the high seas. Russia is also used to engage in proactive behavior. The strategic constraint needs to shore up the deterrence while conversing with countries who have shown little interest in backing away from their military space agenda. This is important not to handcuff agencies responsible for responding militarily to regression, but against U.S. space interests. 2, rules for the road do nothing to change space competition dynamics. Page 15. TCBM cannot provide the international military competition nor change the strategic realities of military competition. Space code becomes a project or avoiding costing improvements in space missions, assurance and resilience of critical military functions. The international political agreements are not a substitute for developing and exercising actual capabilities. 3, no space war, Pavor and Martanovic, China, despite decades of prophecies and no conflicts broken out space related peacefully. 3, contributed to accessibility norms and interdependence space difficulty. There's exists a normative for peace as important as the peace norms to become integrating push around it through legal reinterpretation rather than opposition states perceive real costs for kinetic imposes high diplomatic costs. Any state with the capabilities also operate the satellites and exposes collateral space acts as a strong deterrent. 4, hypersonics aren't escalatory. Enable 19. Defensive solutions that hypersonic will soon be developed. China's Russian acquisition of hypersonics will be stabilized relation conventional mutually assured as rapidly possible. It's important to acknowledge the limitations of hypersonics with the development of defense and countermeasures directed energy weapons such as laser and hyper microwaves addressed that of hypersonic weapons not instantaneous. They must be one used against moving targets at a certain distance. The weapons effective to armored guidance necessitate electronic circuits susceptible to microwave damage. 5, no nuclear terror condition. Story 18. Terrorists may face consideration for backlash internal factorization over their strategy doctrine overwhelming responsibility started saying the international media opportunities cost escalating foreclosures for future competition. Any attack may not only preclude other strategies, but the existence of the group's detonation appears the less strategically advantageous of the nuclear terrorists and consider essentially that organizations will have an opportunity to contemplation and victory with the end of hostility. Each factor presents strong disincentives. 6, no launch on warning. Color 17.
Skip that card.
Okay,
separate off, please.
New off. The United States federal government should transparently develop, deploy, and demonstrate debris removal systems with external non-military verification through government contracts for the private sector and offer remediate debris along with other nations who give permission to do so. Solves the Kessler effect. Cancel 10. One country to get leadership role in the establishing a national program. This would establish development and demonstration which would build the trust and international participation. As study found that actually annually removing a little 5 massive pieces of debris could significantly stabilize the debris environment. The feasible nation, the unilateral development, deploy, and effective system. The United States should take this role. Remediation is. No, I'm not going to say that. It's okay. Back to the case. 6, no launch on warning. Color 17. The range of officers against technical failures and uncertainties terms with the CNC and ensure that the president remains linked to advisors and other civilian control, ensure the procedures, facilities, and communications.
I'm sending out the countdown thing now. Okay, it's been sent. Where'd you mark that? I just sent it out with the marking. Sweet. What time are we right?
Yeah.
The North Korea DA, do you have a card that the U.S. would agree to limiting BMD?
Not in the 1NC, but we also have an internal link about just deterring North Korea more broadly.
So what about non-BMD things is necessary to deter North Korea? What's your non-BMD link?
What? No. You made a question about negotiations. I'm just saying we have an argument about what are you saying?
So you've read this card that's rules of the road could potentially ban BMD from 1987. Why would the U.S. agree to that in negotiations?
Because your plan says they would.
No, it said your card is this could potentially come up. Obviously, the U.S. would not propose that.
This would obviously be a massive all cause to the F because your own Kreppen card is about testing weapons, banning weapons, etc.
Okay, there's a solvency part, but I'm not asking about the case defense. I'm asking about the DA
It demonstrates
part.
that your evidence is consistent with the link story that we have read, which is at the affirmative.
Okay, but why would the U.S. Who in the U.S. would support that? It just seems so unlikely to me.
It's not unlikely. And
so, which part of the Trump administration is going to propose decreasing.
Okay, so this argument definitively cuts both ways. 'Cause
I
it
got the case
demonstrates-
part. We got
Your
that. I'm
creep on
asking
evidence-
about the DA.
Your creep in evidence says, quote, capabilities that could be applied to space warfare, including theater missile defense interceptors, are coming
Yes,
online.
those are all
blah, blah.
things that could come up.
Look,
Who in the Trump
Look,
administration
if you're
would
going
push
for
that?
plan says literally nothing, like we
Okay,
agree, but your solvency evidence very clearly says you limit this type of testing.
How does this treaty's counterplan compete?
Because it doesn't use the president.
It doesn't use the.
That's an
Okay,
effective.
also you said
What if we did?
Also, well, first, just stop. You said in cross-ex you're not a
No,
creep,
I
so-
got that. But like, why does doing both not solve this?
I mean, well, we have a block. The general point is that it doesn't give the Senate the perspective component of it.
The
There's still,
perspective component. What does that mean?
it's because it's no longer perspective. If the plan happens in the Senate, it's like, we would like if you did this. It already happened, so it obviously cannot solve our argument about the Senate getting ahead in terms of negotiating.
It's subsequent advice and consent.
Okay, and who in the Senate? Where is this AI treaty coming from?
We just have a general argument that the Senate would likely advocate future regulations, and it enables a broader U.S. treaty credibility.
So
for
if they
negotiating.
want to do that, why can't they do it now?
Because we don't have credibility that the president has to do all the negotiating, and then it's unlikely other countries
So
will agree.
credibility
because the U.S.
to
will
who?
ratify it. To any number of countries that are developing.
So it's
military
other
AI.
countries need to perceive the U.S. Senate as credible. In
U.S.
order
treaty
for
may
the
be
treaty.
more broadly credible, but the Senate
Okay,
is part
so
of that. Yeah.
and the thing that determines whether other countries think the Senate is credible is whether this
Well, it's
the
also,
sequencing answer to the perm. That's like what makes China think that the Senate has
it's also
power
about
or
whether
not.
Congress can propose an arms control
I
treaty
just
on
can't wait
issues
to
of
see that
AI,
part.
and they can't do that if it's presidential negotiation.
Okay,
of
what
treaty
what
in the first place.
does the act do that increases missile transfers to Iran?
So one, we just have a general link about appeasement, so it signals to Russia and China that we are unlikely to contain them in the future. But second,
Where's the appeasement card?
the only link card on the DA.
Skolasky?
It is quite significant and encourages Chinese and Russian officials to discount our non-prolife pleadings, fosters disturbing cynicism regarding export controls, and accelerates missile prolife.
Yeah, well, that's about technical. That's technical help. That's
No,
about tech transfer.
That is not what that line. U.S. and Chinese space cooperation.
Where's the part about appeasement?
I literally just read you the
No,
line. It
that's
fosters cynicism. It makes us our pleadings for them.
The next
to not,
line is, what does this missile technology assistance consist of?
I,
In the
I,
case of the U.S., space cooperation. It's about like missile transfers.
I mean, so we have the one link about appeasement, but the other link is more broadly about limiting China's need to sort of counter the U.S., which allows them to funnel
Okay,
technology.
where's
to the
that
US.
in this card?
The next line.
The line I just read to you about tech transfers?
Firms can use this money to finance their missile development
Money.
and
We
export.
don't pay them anything.
I understand, but it creates a budgetary trade-off that enables them.
What's
to
the
do so.
budgetary trade-off that comes from the plan?
They no longer have to. You read all these cards and you're wanting to see about how it stops them from developing hypersonics, et cetera, which would enable the sort of financing.
But those are
needed.
the things they transfer to Iran as per your ad. That seems like a link.
Well, not hypersonics.
Those are, wait, why not?
I don't
If they want to give shit
If
to
they
Iran,
give
why
it-
won't
if
they
they
give
give
the
it
scarier
hypersonics,
stuff to
then,
Iran?
then
What?
if they give it hypersonics, then argument is that they would be able to sell, export that technology to Iran.
Okay, that's the link term that Congress disagreed with.
Wait, now how is that a link term?
Because-
you literally just said you literally just concede that the plan results in Russia selling hypersonics to Iran. Like, do you think that's a
you're
link
like,
term?
if the U.S. Rom's like, the link is they stop doing hypersonics, right? Is that the link?
Well,
The link is
it's-
appeasement,
it's-
okay?
it's-
Just
Okay,
like
is there any
you
other link besides appeasement? Like, are we gonna
explain?
pretend
Just
about
explain.
this?
So
Okay,
the cards has
whatever, we'll
four
talk about
things.
it.
There's the export thing. There's the tech transfer. There's the appeasement.
there is
there's
the tech transfer.
intangible technology.
Everything's conditional, all the planks, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What's your definition of a space weapon?
We didn't read
From the
one.
one
We
we
just
read.
read a definition of what it means to control.
Arms.
So what are arms?
Well, space weapons, weapons that are operational in space.
All right.
941, I think.
Yeah. We good for an order?
Sure.
The management advantage, the altitude strikes advantage, T, the debris advantage, or the debris counterplan, the treaties counterplan, the deterrence counterplan, the NOCO DA, the Iran DA, the contingent. All right, we use 10 more seconds.
All right, 931.
So, ASAT stuff, then debris, right? Not.
No, debris then makes sense. Although I resent that you've renamed my advantage something so crude. We good? Great. Both sides would say yes, they have an incentive to clarify escalation thresholds and historical success of the ANC agreement means that extending the framework to an agreement in space works with the pro and crap on evidence is the only evidence about the plan. Their state cards are about a binding treaty which would require verification, which our evidence explicitly answers. The softer evidence is flagrantly out and says that the geopolitical guidelines now will cause a snowballing debris effect. The blue evidence is highlighted for context. The Struby evidence says that there's consensus that it's impending and unsustainable, and the underlined part, all causes don't matter. Debris collisions are relevant if we solve ASATs and craft collisions in space. Doesn't matter because traffic will stop collisions from those new satellites. And small debris doesn't say it would cause Kessler debris hits, cause where they're perceived as attacks on splintering rubble hits other satellites, which looks like a full constellation attack. It causes retowers to Stratford components who evidence they also drop that satellites cause more small transparency creates escalatory fireworks that preserve man, which prevents nuclear escalation, which is that their defense which takes out the DA but not the K's lack of access, causes terrestrial war and miscalculated opaque war causes extinction. Both sides are on a hair trigger. Cultural differences remove conflict, fire breaks, and weapon insecurity causes users to lose it, which the Oscar evidence fail states also cause extinction. Disaster mitigation is key, and refugee management causes nuclear wars to the Crimson Coleman evidence. So do food shortages, which is another conceded impact. Economic line causes World War III from the convergence of nationalism, protectionism, and unstable road states for culture. The DA makes more inevitable, which makes more inevitable the altitude strikes advantage. Yes, compliance or evidence about a treaty which answers their counterplan, but not the app, because it would have to be binding. Yes, compliance clarifies red lines and creates a vocabulary for managing competition. Non-compliance causes spotlighting and raises the reputational cost of defection, and while limiting the scope of possibilities, which is the pro shape or crap on evidence. It means don't prevent miscode, even if they aren't perfectly compliant, because it balances signaling. EC is the crown jewel of arms control. There's a reason TC and TCM scale is only our argument. It's not about the app. It says that non-military stuff doesn't cause moderation. We agree that's why creating a diplomatic framework is necessary. Early striking and early warning satellite comes to nuclear wars perceived as a first strike in America responds with overwhelming force, which Paul Peter Miller and Pearl evidence independently collapses deterrence and causes a switch to launch on warning down to their defenses sitting in early detection satellites about LEO strikes hypersonics with ambiguous halos cause nuclear war. They make everyone vulnerable to a first strike cause C3 evolution miscalculation. First strike doesn't fire evidence. It also causes shift to launch on warning independently causes nuclear war from miscalculation dead hammers. The Arbatov and Weber evidence independently causes nuclear diversification. Nuclear terror is only stabilizing if we know they aren't nuclear, which linkers their defense. They also drop the nuclear stuff and they cause war. We mean planetary defense is debris. Shred 15. The term planetary defense includes everything in solar, weather to space, debris to NEOs, arms control is usage, collected. 19 arms control is when country was ready to develop, production, time, proliferation, distribution, or usage of weapons, arms control may refer to small arms, conventional, or WMD. Don't go to negative unless it is impossible. Anything else incentivized topicality, which crowds out something. Anything else is impossible because the dual use of freeze. 14. It is impossible to find space weapon control in arms. This is not definition of what constitutes weapons. We should regulate and control the right behavior rather than having to limit it. Is how they use it. The matters SCM literally says themselves the advocate is 17 increasing interest in space traffic management. That is peacetime rules on the road for on-orbit operations. Happens for one. Our pressure traffic management rules, which organized operations in several proposed space code of conduct outlining responsible behaviors in space debris would make space travel impossible. That means we're also HSI vote -1 over limiting it arbitrarily. Of course, the after defend a bunch of random shit that eliminates the core controversy with prohibiting particular kinds of weapons and how they're used to precision. Everyone has their own cat definition of what the topic words mean, but we do the part relevant here is, which is eliminating American capability. Their part of the prescription about optimizing arms control, and it's the conclusion of a blog post 3 as relevant terrestrial definitions of arms control don't make sense because you can't define a weapon in space. The debris counter. Permutation do both. It doesn't solve ASAP deployment or development of weapons. Unilateral cleanup doesn't solve debris and or from weaponization, collision, and orbital congestion. Even if the counterplan removes stuff, it can't keep up with the arms race. That strap-on through a strap for deployment alone would cause war because weaponization fears escalate into crisis, but it doesn't solve a conservative effort, which is the Pekin evidence. The treaties counterplan. Permutation do both. They look like they're formalizing an executive agreement, which solves credibility. Permutation do the counterplan. Positional competition is stupid. We said it would likely be a result of an executive agreement, but it could be formalized by Congress. No evidence says the treaties now solve global AI, or that the outcome would be sufficient, or that the Congress would approve it. Arms racing makes them inevitable because states will field asymmetric weapons, which is the entire first advantage. The Senate obviously won't do arms control later. They haven't read a card about it. It's negotiated by the president and verified by Congress, which is a logical conclusion of how the plan could happen. Called is impossible now without global regs, which makes our commitment to broader arms control impossible, which is the crap on evidence. Interdependence solves AI escalation. Sherman 3.7. The premise of AI research is zero-sum, especially reason to do American persons and Chinese AI companies and Chinese and the other directions. The interconnections between the U.S. and China development are also an alteration. The open source nature of AI research should be responsible of information across borders. Competition is not trying to beat the U.S. without understanding what winning means. But if China military does drones fly faster, the result is unclear. The deterrence counterplan.
I just say all this stuff on cases of reason treaties.
All this stuff on the cases of reason treaties don't solve. The deterrence counterplan. Permutation do both. It doesn't solve high altitude. There are too vulnerable strikes are in the playbook already, which is all their evidence. Citing PLA white papers, resilience doesn't solve. It looks like the U.S. is securing a second strike, which causes full escalation, which is the McDonald evidence. They look like we're shifting to a full stack track, which is pearl diversification, is the slow which causes a launch on warning disaggregation and C3 devolution. All of that causes miscalculation, but doesn't solve cascades and singular attacks that hit early warning satellites. Which diversification slashes privacy causes worse force. Colby 16. A force without space would be far less capable. It seems difficult to immensely overreach. Human terrestrial remotely is affecting ground base cannot support maneuvering forces at the forward edge of the battle. Airborne ISR cannot operate. Reach would be limited. The U.S. cannot sacrifice space and hope this military will be effective. It causes miscalc Grego 18. If the space launch and distributed capable to larger constellation satellites will be less robust. It might set us into the onset of radar attack. They are not breakable. They present collision has their credibility. Retaliation could be undermined if the attacker expectation of being anonymous. The instead works against stability. Permutation do both. It obviously shields the link to all of the other stuff because it would make our stuff super strong in space. The no code DA. It's about AC, not an agreement in space. We don't limit BMD. The U.S. would never agree to that burden, and there's no evidence substantiating it, only that we would limit debris producing BMD attacks, which is the frame. There's no evidence collision testing is key. No-code war. Freebit 3.5. I know we ended a deadlock. Media label talks failure, but ended the negotiation routine war with no code is not a good option for the U.S. This danger of artillery power closes all uncertainty. The location of no theories weapons the U.S. version 2. Under the war, no code knows one thing that would trigger a PM to strike would be to develop weapons that wants to avoid such a strike at all costs. Failed negotiation is a reality, which is war is not likely given both room for obstinacy. Testing undermines the credibility of deterrence government. 11. Decoy discrimination can be addressed by collision testing failure due to miscalculation or embarrassing and undermined deterrent value problems. Could be detecting non-collision tests close by mode band. Equally effective in revealing the false also provide the same precision as test ending in collision, even if unrestricted test BMD cannot be relied on. Performance will degrade combat against realistic threat BMD is completely ineffective. They say no evidence on case that they wouldn't restrict their arsenals, which proved that there's not a link. Diversification causes miscalc. Grego 18. If space launch removes short distributed capabilities, larger constellation satellites will reveal less robust mind sense of stability onset of rigor attack. They're not trackable. They present collision have their credibility. Retaliation can be undermined if the attacker's expectation to be anonymous, and it doesn't solve testing. Grego 18. GMD displays significant problems unreliable against civil threats. Processing not right from which that appeals cannot be written off the record. The record has not improved over time. The agency continues to discover new features of sensor information. The exo vehicle has been problematic. This is tested only limited conditions, not real world threats. Mark the card of real world threats. Russian war causes extinction outweighs Cold Bear 70. During the war between the U.S. and Russia, aftermath of the U.S. first was weapons to make it impossible to go through that of extension would be rate extension only possible between the U.S. and Russia. Can you mark that? Thank you. You're Randy. Let's go. Stop my timer. Alright, we're good. Permutation with it shields the link. The link's insane. It's about arms sales, and the plane doesn't solve that. Space co-op science increasing lunar aspirations after 19. Chances may be high over trade, but when it comes to space, the U.S. and China collaborate more than ever. NSA and NASA share info in China's lunar orbit or renewed collaboration. China's trying to get to the moon. Everyone is proliferating. Now their evidence says we're actively cooperating, which was the entire process. Only we saw Pearl Farbenov 11. Although the U.S. possesses technical superiority over arms race, begin would involve other countries. The U.S. would have the most elusive. It is the country that relies most on Nazi proliferation. The richest in space arms race and inevitably divert one more on nuclear missile proliferation as well. As the reverse organization for non-proliferation regime, the greatest danger would come from massive false alarms and command malfunctions. The plan is is not a concession because it doesn't meaningfully alter balance of power, just clarifies diplomatic red lines. We do it now. Row 314, the U.S. and China convene state security talks in addition to talks, build confidence, reduce the risk of miscalculation. The two sides establish ESG focus on exploring space co-op and terrestrially. Win 0319 at the last minute, Sugar Government such a constructive relationship between 2014 countries, the rules behavior for equal forces. 2017 initiated joint dialogue about price communication and containment. DA causes war. Jaleel 19 far from prohibition in China seems to have the conflict. China and the U.S. is not inevitable. It would amount to a self-fulfilling prophecy engagement rather than containment as a policy that would lead to more stable and secure environment. We saw competition. The arms control signals reconciliation and manages great power competition, but it clarifies red lines that make them less likely to probe. Now the dual evidence is about going to the moon, not arms control. They're distinct, and it goes out and says existing covers budget cuts and calls for increased cooperation with allies, which is the underlying part of their evidence. Appeasement's wrong for China. Haas 19. The U.S. and China is locking themselves into a security dilemma. Do average cooperation holding China to a tactical confrontation raises self-fulfilling prophecy. There may risk is reaping conclusion to include immense pressure, diminished differences in fighting as well. Some co-op may exist comfortably. The important agenda items are global climate pandemics and nuclear given the economic relationship. How to power global agendas is an essential task. The Fisher evidence says it undermines resolve or co-op is key. Probing is inevitable now from space deployments. Only a question of moderating the impact because their own author says containment is impossible. The blue lines are there for context. Appeasement thumbs went out. Now, 19. Attended church on deciders, houses, buildings, covered cultural education, infrastructure, e-commerce, and trade, government, side of series of cooperative agreements to enhance relations as well as agriculture, energy, and education. Trade frictions a dark shadow, but a relationship is bigger than a single trade spec.
Okay, we have 1330. Yeah. Okay. What was the last argument on the Russia DA and the first argument on containment?
The last argument on the Russia DA was the what's now evidence. The first argument on the containment DA was the Jaleel evidence.
What was the last one on the Iran one? With
what now? It's tagged and terrestrially.
Okay, so I have a question. You said on the North Korea DA the plan doesn't get rid of non-kinetic space strikes?
The plan would likely not result in a ban on debris-producing ASAT.
Okay, so you don't get rid of any kinetic ASATs?
No, it would not get rid of testing them. It would only likely get rid of debris-producing ones.
Wait, so the plan prohibits testing of what?
So the likely results of the plan would be a moratorium on high debris-producing ASAT tests.
What? So you only stop debris-producing ASATs in GEO?
Our evidence says that the likely results of the
what
plan
card are you
would be
referencing?
the Pearl and Bailey evidence and the Crepon evidence says both countries have an incentive to limit where we can test
Pearl
BMD
and
to
Bailey
things
is
that
on
would
which
stop
advantage?
pollution of the atmosphere with debris.
Pearl
But
and
it would
Bailey.
not result in a full prohibition on BMD
Okay, got
testing.
it. Pearl and Bailey and Crepon.
Crepon. I think McDonald too.
Okay, what is your best card that describes the quantitative increase in the probability of collision over the next 200 years as a result of increase in debris?
So I don't know about the 200 years thing, but our Stratfor evidence and our SUE evidence says that the deployment of large amounts of ASATs would be sufficient to
Okay,
cause
so
an impact.
Sue from 2010, there was been dozens of ASATs.
No, there has not actually been dozens of ASATs.
So
since
India
2010.
tested, China tested, the U.S. tested, Russia tested.
The China and Russia have not tested
Okay.
since 2010.
The card starts
and
with-
India's was low altitude and didn't produce debris, which is an example of the kind
Okay,
of test
but
the app would likely.
Obviously, so you don't solve the we read a card in the 1NC that says the amount of spacecraft in outer space is about to sextuple. So we're about to have more launched in outer space in the next 2 years than we have in the entire history of the space age. How possibly can an ASAT produce more debris than that?
So launches don't produce debris in a significant
You have
way.
conceded a card that says that they are
we
inherently
literally,
coordinated.
I don't think you know what the word conceded means. The Pearl evidence says that diplomatic gestures that limit the speed at which spacecraft can do things like move
Okay, so-
near one another, the speed at which they can move through densities
Right,
and
but
high
they
traffic
become
makes them less
defunct
likely
after-
to collide. And no one has read evidence
Got
that
it.
deployment of those things alone will cause
Right, but, okay,
Tesla.
but this really doesn't answer my initial question, which all this says is that debris will increase. It does not describe how much it will increase. And your best
So,
card
I'm sorry, what is it in that sentence?
debris. How much debris
No,
will
I mean the
increase.
piece of evidence that you're.
Any card in
writing
the
down.
1AC that describes the
The
quantitative.
SUE evidence and the Stratfor evidence that says
Okay.
deployment of ASATs will imperil off satellites.
Okay,
A frame for this
got
is
it,
that
got it,
Tesla
got it,
doesn't
got
need
it,
to
got
happen
it,
for
got it.
us to have an invasion.
Okay, so you're treaty's key argument. The first argument on management, there's
You don't have a-
there's no argument on management. So the altitude strikes, the first argument on AT cheat, it says, treaties, they're binding, which requires verification. The counterplan just does a treaty that's the same rules of the road or whatever the AF is. So why is the counterplan binding or requires some sort of verification?
So you've read a card that says they don't like intrusive inspections now.
Why does the counterplan involve that?
If it doesn't, then there's not a solvency differential.
Okay, but this is your only solvency deficit. So if the counterplan results in the exact same thing as the AF, just through a treaty, what's your deficit?
it doesn't, like, we've read evidence that only executive agreements
Right, but-
can do things
Yeah,
like
but
elbow out
outside
senators.
really updatable.
So you're,
Yeah,
but you're,
they're not periodically updatable, is one thing. The
Okay,
Pearl
but
evidence
that's-
says that the process of having executives negotiate executive agreements is important
okay,
because
so
it keeps
the
senators
cards
and
I
politicization
just want
out
to
of
clarify
the
then,
agreement.
the cards you're referencing for this are the last Crepon
Pearl and
card,
Bailey and Listener.
not Crepon, the one that uses the words treaty, the like one about a treaty is neither.
Oh yeah,
you're
Crepon
not
also
talking about,
says treaties don't solve.
Okay.
But Pearl and Bailey's the new one, and Listener is the one that describes the bilateral negotiations
Pearl-
between executive agencies
got it, so
that would negotiate.
Pearl, Listener, Crepon. Anything else?
Maybe McDonald too.
Okay.
Did you read this planned cells proliferation card on
Yep.
IRB?
Yeah. There's no theory, right?
No.
Okay. Sorry, so 2AC2 on the treaties counterplan, perm do both. I've written down the word formal, and then the next argument is perm do the counterplan formalizes.
Perm do both would shield the link because it looks like the Senate formalizing an executive
So
agreement.
this is just perm shield.
Yeah, the formal thing is a shield.
Okay, so this is all 2AC1.
I'll just say no to the bottom. Actually, I got 5:30. I'm setting up the doc right now. Oh, just a second. I'm doing crazy. All the others. I can make a quick statement. Okay, I can say can't moderate. Okay, I can do. What do you want to do? I don't. Okay, it's fine. Just the salty stuff takes it out. It's fine.
Okay.
Moderate behavior. So let me just add another card then. I'll just add a card that's actually doesn't fit to John's behavior. Okay, but you can kick just say the cases. Alright, we have 4 minutes now. I added some extra cards also.
On the label sheets while you give the order, so you have to go slow.
Okay, order is the North Korea Interceptors DA, the ICBM DA.
That's Iran, right?
Yeah, so then the domain instability, or I'm sorry, the ASAT stuff, and then debris advantage.
I really do like the man split the best, but
Devastating.
Yeah. So sorry.
Okay. Can I use your terms?
Sorry.
That's the US champion.
Cool.
Okay, ready? We'll concede those noise to the plan. That means we're not going for the descent. However, not solving BMD demonstrates the most any portion of the case. Cooper 2011 in line of the quote to ASA BMD. Rules control, but not the chief control by the testing against BM targets right now for informational performance, liability of intercept science, to build the test of BMD system can engage sound race and compared to the high success rate. BMD impacts the ice and red element to perceive the base of the fly which obviously turns all this space work missed out. The Iran descent at the top. Iran proliferation costs nuclear, but the complex level alliances and military guarantees all spur regional arms race, strong nature powers, and escalated full-blown nuclear turn space warfare, which logically turns the debris argument, which is contingent on space war happening in the first place, turns affirmative self to destroy diplomatic norms, civil confidence. 4. Proliferation costs nuclear war. Current in 2015 spread to global threats, severe threats international security, including global terrorism, instability, weakened alliances, as well as making new state flags, security, sanctions, incentive to use strikes, power under strike, emphasize use loads of pressure, of leaders initiated across by playing, bring mission states, increase the risk of force, love to solve after go back down, many above chemicals, future guys could result in devastating nuclear exchanges spread, increase risk of nuclear terrorism, nuclear weapons, involve nuclear powers, contribute resources, states with nuclear weapons, incentives to low level aggression, any credit, cause could result in catastrophic nuclear exchange, to be the permission to both, obviously, links to the event, we can reach space cooperation very large. If you don't believe so, then kick the counterpart force, which is considered logical conditionality, which is good and necessary for negative flexibility, to be they say no, like, 1 empiric space cooperation, worth over $400 million was funneled to military technology, to Iran, 2 tech transfer, to our transfer space technology boost commercial operations, following engineering for missile development and exports, 3 capital cooperation flushes money transfers that directly finance missile development and exports, 4 intangible technology, affirmative shares information on timely, reliable, accurate placement of satellites in space that can be used for missile warheads, or else they cannot solve any portion of the arguments about ASATs, writ large, Sokolsky, 5 Russia, the uniquely likely, Sokolsky 3, the more cooperative Russian multi-class self-centered technology nation to be used for military Russia, and that is political action, the full leverage of force, Russia, blood, training, security issues, second, cultural, political action, Russia sanctions to maintain industry, inducing space military section, efforts to maintain drive Russia's risky exports, guarding this little German argument, keep it from having to further downside, those motivations quite important, as space as a part of the Shishon missiles in the tension between Russia, U.S. civilian, Russian space cooperation, peace, Russian transfer to Moscow, knows being diverted and Iran. This space cooperation is doomed to be encouraged proliferation. 6. China, Julie space technology will be used to funnel missile programs. Zaborsky, 2003. The China's most vivid example of inseparability peaceful and military operations here. Clear probability of peaceful cooperation training system, ballistic missile program. China, great. Well, industrial cooperation shows the visibility of marketing, civilian, military goods and services. Because inseparability cooperation become a sensitive military issue. Companies are said to have provided expertise that can be used to improve accuracy and reliability for dry space. Not proliferation, actually close watch cooperation between China and other countries. Any permanent Chinese space launch can be more significant, more threatening missile. 7. The plan snowballs in future engagement with China. So even if the plan itself doesn't link its future effects will link. Stockkeys 19. Don't expect US China to work cooperatively any times in the future. The decision to China can be traced back to a move promoting NASA in the way from cooperating China's Wolf Amendment held for 7 years. The US made some small goals working with China's space experiment, but not permitted the space agent officials NASA and China's space agency. A different general Cambodia. The true partnership was the true partnership cannot have until the Wolf Amendment exchange. 8. Empirics proof link Senator Smith 2000. The administration feel like any Russian technology cooperation by any more symbolic than any substantive. In fact, clearly evidence to the Kremlin is greater because of the possibility of technology sharing is mistakes with the one control between Russian government and the such interference like having understood the current strategy is not supposed to convince the Russian Federation with the fall of its ancient weapons, also racial as well as iron technology. 9. Subsidies cooperation subsidized to arms knowledge exports. Speakers of advisory group on Russia 2003 years. Russian participation government announced that cooperation space is growing escalating cost Russian government for immediate commitment to the commission for disclosing state about health vitality U.S. Russian space cooperation government administration cost of delays might be justified for innovation Russian scientists and the government is willing to provide encouragement to scientists, business and academic speeches that scientists never have to the Russian research institutes or assist in the subset of range of companies, Russian military industrial companies engaged in space as well as proliferation trees through the space cooperation is high now. 1. The counterpart freezes cooperation solves no new one area answers the judge can't get the counterpart's problem. 2. The thumper surprised in 2. Arguing 7. 3. Status quo cooperation is superficial. Stocky 19. China science became permanent upward space and official NASA China space agency set aside the difference they had to receive away from Congress. The true parties for China cannot have it until Wolf Amendment exchange. 4. The thumpers are expiring. Continuation of old news are minor. None of them confer credibility. Echo 18. Growing gap in company space partners with all changing alarming. Set of Russian American hardly space which all about questions of reliability space program and private companies undercover Russian markets to the U.S. background check in place. Russia enters 2022. NASA contract with Moscow carrying astronauts in 2020. By 2025, Russia's Washington will stop supporting ISIS. Watching future cooperation with the U.S. will be a junior part of Russia can afford to participate in the country. Project in the second tier role. 5. New areas. The plan is a bull from the a new area of cooperation that's distinguished. 6. New cooperative ventures are key. Listen 16. Less than 16 new cooperative ventures have appeared less frequently drunk collective phase last spotted this under project indically between 22 and 16 imposed Crimea problems more difficult. Russia, so the cooperation space is useful to buy the decline will see demonstrated size to great power and space and legitimize cooperation long term is needed for pressing and the international system in Moscow's technological progress to too easy for they say Iran's proliferation now. 1. Sanctions check Iran missile proliferation now. We sanction their space program. 2. Research institutes that has created huge technical difficulties to drive to capital necessary to proliferate. If they read a card, we obviously get more cards in the one area which just proves you should not trust this argument whatsoever. 2. 5. This is self proliferation. That will be on case 2. 6. The plan is not a concession. That was answered on the link debate. 2. 7. They see bilateral TCBMs are happening now. 1. These are not space arguments. They concede the space critical. 2. F-numbers are non-essential issues. 19. Opportunities for cooperation. China, U.S. are trying to dispute the cooperation not a priority for the Chinese and the U.S. will almost areas are overwhelming cooperation and also the nation again to make them more conversational. Previous times to showcase their cooperation have come nothing. China and the U.S. will work together on non-essential issues. Now the ASAT advantage. At the top 1 and 2. 1. The affirmative fails. 1. China and Russia will cheat rules of their own space. Their hostile actors have a history of pocketing concessions and virtually norms of convenience. Cheating turns the case means Russia and China to have the upper hand while the U.S. is voluntarily hamstrings to try capabilities of the blackness. 2. Cross-examination demonstrates the affirmative is fundamentally weak. No verification, no compliance mechanism, no sanction mechanism, nothing whatsoever to possibly change the behavior of Russia or China. 3. They see space as a zone of competition. Listen to 15. Subsequently the code will leave the U.S. further away to advantage on space may benefit geopolitical adversaries. Not subsequently the code. The subsequent Russia makes advantage on space creating more dangerous, unpredictable situation for all space actors. 4. Aggression, self-serving behavior outweigh. Lobach is 17. The last can still play with adversaries. U.S. practicing against ASA and interference with German norms of self-serving behavior has been the most obvious potential in effort to create benign rules for likely to replace it. It seems extremely unlikely that I imprudent to assume the basis of the defense plan another one. Should aim for thinking about space as an invasion of sovereign nation, Putin invade Ukraine, spine rational hedge or include violation of national agreements. 5. Game 3 proves China $13 space argument for reducing weaponization and unlikely ban weaponization focus on president law. If China Russia violate proliferation, it can have seen a head start in the space which could weaken U.S. military capability remains strong possible to the point of securely developed weapons. The incentives to effective war in Spain, which makes us resolution impossible. 6. Both countries are path dependent. Lobach is 17. While Russia making technical structure weapons capacity to destroy U.S. talents and using foreign policy trying to hobble potential U.S. space weapons purposely pursuing arms control agreement because the U.S. will comply. The Russians now have the same constitutional political strength. The Russians are accustomed to violating arms control agreements. There's no chance that the Russians have no external arms control as well as obligation. 6. This demonstrates they can't access any turn on the containment decide because they cannot lead to broader relations. Start of 15. So that a cooperation space holds cooperation on with foreign resources may be heavily because a little from treasure action. Russian predators to the U.S. not friend from Ukraine. Space cooperation has now built up friend worsening security environment. Space cooperation China similar like moderate behavior. Now some minister of China commits over China's hacking. Space cooperation falls in the realm of self-power. If the U.S. are not like-minded, it is not really sufficient space cooperation, but of divergent national interest. 8. Chinese relations are impossible. Again, 2010, pretending to be friends with dramatic fluctuations, but only 2 viable alternatives are the real friendship and superficial amity power competition between 2 nations making unlikely that China. And this case, real friendship, the process of the rise, the realistic alternative of relation and superficial friendship to superficial amity, to large regional favor to China. The U.S. should give the policy of pretending to be friends. 1 is number 3, no risk of space, while 1 accessibility is constantly difficult. with launch conflict in space. 2, norms. OST is powerful enough to dissipate conflict in favor of peaceful resolution, which is demonstrated if norms truly work, and those two will solve. 3, environmental independence. Any nation with AI technology has satellites of their own and will want to cut off their entire usage of space. That's the proof for evidence for no impact of habits. Hamburg 17. This much is spaceport weight habits of this ground hypotheticals. The analogy of Pearl Harbor is spreads for cross-defensive offensive capability. As space assets in orbit with the response to the scales is self-determined with the high cost launch capacity international. Is taken with ground location to be detected in the distracted was like commerce fiber. Several other some become essential. That takes off right orbit so debris saturated further military operations become possible. There must be no equal separating targets from states on non-evolution state spread space technology globally complicates actions and ability to replace loss speed that none of the capacity will dominate issues globally reach make finders to make confined things to small areas. 1, see for novas hypersonics happening. They don't cause more expansion of arsenals correlates with stronger stability of racing opportunity cost for aggression as available evidence. 2, hypersonic threat is overblown. Lead 19 by pitching as obstacle to become a hypersonic glide development develop these systems require large numbers of support restrictions that in front of the glide vehicle. The spring field 27 expanding pollution failure for Russian claims about hypersonic weapon development tree taken with a grain of salt. There's more flight testing. The Russian notorious by receiving more particular data having that day slip again. 1C5 they drop no risk of nuclear terror because even if a terrorist gets a weapon they won't use them. It destroys the only bargain chip that limits the group's hope of permanent radiology and guarantees the extinction. That's Macintosh's story drops. They don't get to answer this in the 1A. Finally 1 and C6 is finally 1 and C6 the accident stuff. 2 and C counted by the United States government to establish a binding internal policy stating that will not retaliate to terror attacks and publicist policy to the Russian Federation. We don't have launcher warning in the status quo and it would just go in the ocean, which means there's no risk of this stuff happening even if they win the terror stuff. Now the debris stuff. 1 and C 2 and 3 group of the impact defense. 1, extremely low probability in time frame. The current risk of debris collisions is 0.1% when will only grow 30% 200 years after your great grandkids die. The probability of collision will be deciding 0.13%. Our cars demonstrably do not go for them because they're stating the probabilities and they really highly say that collisions will occur. We don't disagree that collisions are likely, but just that collisions will occur. Just that they're fundamentally unlikely. 2, the misreading Kessler temperature is likely to find low authority because atmosphere jungle just particle and collision pressure lower authority can risk growth and collision factors also between high population reduced. 3, Kessler fiction on the horizon. Curve 15, the Kessler cannot be essential and pressure we have time to deal with. Kessler on the medium horizon. 4, this counts for the risk of spacecraft is minimal. All 16 public culture based collision space. Almost all articles exaggerated misleading debris now. In cross space empty vast 1/2 degree 4 to some intentional to status more than half a degree. Nothing gets wave warping out to the brief car predicted 135 shuttle flies with 30 function size half a million objects space with fewer than 50 kilo collision. Why? Or 1 and C4 the all causes new space. Look, their own evidence demonstrates that Kessler effect is happening. Their Stratcom evidence is terrible and it just says the spaceport is likely to increase the amount of debris, but that assumes that the status quo is stable, which is fundamentally is not. The hub says that companies posting 20,000 satellites in orbit, and their argument this doesn't create debris is just fundamentally a lie and not based on any science, which is demonstrated by our 1 and C6 and our Heltruth and Arnold evidences from 2 PhDs who are saying that this stuff is all likely to cause debris because the people don't buy into mitigation guidelines. 2, mitigation guidelines fail, they'll create debris. Floor is 10, and also the ancient caps that put a private in the commercial space industry is clearly giving an industry powerful state regulation affecting the space travel and result disaster consequences. 3, profits always sustainability. Larson 18 fails to bring complacent and reliable private sector, making an industry dedicated, making profit be charged to practices to own abuse. Profits will dominate. Finally, 1 and C7 debris is inevitable because it's too small. 1, small debris can't be tracked and can destroy satellites. Their evidence says none of their evidence speaks to any of this whatsoever. They're just disputing the claim that debris doesn't take it out. It's only based on space where that's completely wrong. 2, small debris takes out the case. Open up 15. Small debris is particularly dangerous debris. Travels much faster, be shot in any direction. Collision debris reach 54,000 kilometers per hour. Fragments says the bullet control space station destroys more than 90% of debris. Is a deadly class. U.S. Russia not trying to be small in the 10 centimeters. Vast majority of space debris have been identified. The firm demonstrably does not create any sort of norms whatsoever. It's about space weapons, not any of these sorts of regulations.
We're probably good.
Okay. The order is the what do you call it? Like Prestige China DA, and then the device of the same kind of one. Oh, okay, yeah. Then Unilat.
Is it 356?
The Unilat like deterrence by denial counterplan. The China DA / containment. Then the Unilat debris counterplan, and then the advice of consent counterplan.
I'm just gonna assume it's not.
Yeah, sure.
F? Is this your problem? Yeah.
The order is deterrence, prestige, debris counterplan, and treaty counterplan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
If doc's close to yeah, it's not gonna crash. I made sure of that. Watch it crash now.
I'm good.
Alright.
Deterrence counterplan concede the permutation. We're not going for the containment DA. They don't access any of the link term because all the arguments in the 2NC about how competition fails answer that they have not read good China, not revisionist answer. The 2NC evidence is far better and more recent. Appeasement thumbs only takes out the China part of the other dissent, but not the Russia part. The debris counterplan, we're not going for it. Concede the permutation, but remediation, they've conceded that remediation alone can't solve or mitigation can't solve, so the debris is just fundamentally inevitable. The treaties counterplan at the top. One, the counterplan solves the entire case. It results in the same cooperative policy, which meets the threshold for 100% solvency. Two, AA outweighs lack of norms, making it more likely to escalate the nuclear war. Perspective advice and consent is key to get ahead of the ball and solve 2EC1 permutation to both. One, it doesn't set a precedent. The permutation makes the Senate advice and consent subsequent rather than prospective, which locks in the norm that the Senate approval must follow presidential negotiation. Two, meaningful and prior negotiation is key. The permutation denies the Senate role in shaping the agreements over the plan. Got withdrawal. Prospective advice and consent gives the Senate meaningful role in negotiations. The Senate has no formal role. The absence breaks the multilateral treaty. The meaningful Senate role in negotiation shields treaty from the struggle of the President. Senate for the control of foreign policy. The war for the President. Political opponents subsequent advice consents make the relations adversarial because it separates the roles and encourages them. The second is one Senate is presented the already negotiated the roles approving, not influencing it. Three, the perm denies the possibility of a Senate veto key to negotiating 11. Got withdrawal. Prospective advice and consent offers the Senate preserve the treaty negotiated. Others responsible allow the Senate retaining powerful dose of control for upper chin to reject any treaty finds the terms of the constitutional principle right and shot by capital defense and the integral treaty clause the opposition of the Senate veto constraining the executive branch with preserving the most control available to the Senate while creating a workable system for treaty making. Four, do both is two votes, not prospective. Got withdrawal. Senate could also develop the process similar to favorite resolution which should object both provided the President negotiates whether the terms of prospective advice consent subsequent fair vote would be required. The prospective advice consent is superior to the approach for multilateral treaties. Five, the perm can't give the Senate a meaningful negotiating role. The advice consent is presumptively subsequent now, only making it explicitly prospective solves. Bradley 15, the Constitution is intended for the President not to seek the approval and also consult the Senate during the process of negotiation. Treaty the Washington moved away from seeking the advice during the treaty process. The part of the practice emphasis the executive negotiates with the formally consulting the Senate presents the Senate for approval. 2AC2 perm to the counterplan. One, the counterplan is plan minus because it does not mandate cooperation. It only approves the negotiation of a treaty over the plan. Severance is a voting issue because it makes the app a moving target. Two, plan vagueness means hold them to solvency evidence. They said they were CAA and so does the solvency evidence. Three, national space policy must include the President. McLaughlin 18. 13, by purpose of members of the Commission to identify key matters of control. Only the President has the authority to set national space policy and to provide guidance to senior official. Four, establish means legislation. And four, the modern dictionaries follow Johnson by defining establishes an act of law or statute permanently. Five, treaty approval is not legislation. Got trouble is far from clear. The Senate is acting as a legislative body. Treaty making the Senate is the executive council. Treaty making the Senate goes into executive session when the treaty concerning the treaty clause is not separated out the role of the executive legislature. Unlike in the legislative Senate stands out on one side. Treaty making comparison with the President. Six, the USFG means all three. UW20, the United States federal government is simply made of all three branches. Six, should mean certain and immediate. Substance 94, context made certain more than desirable. Should be doing must be immediately effective. Post something that will become effective in the future. Eight, if it's not a counterplan, it's an aft. That's worse because the negative is always reactive to act strategy. Aft teams will get to defend their mechanism against the counterplans with the negative. Whatever, nothing. They get predetermined, perhaps to find cheeky mechanisms to unbounded NSP that skew negative strategy. Net ground outweighs the topic is colossal. You should err towards a negative instead of magnifying the existing aft bias. 2AC3 is Congress 1 to AI 1 CAA shift. The causes the executive to use prospective advice and consent to enable future agreements. 2, the counterplan sets a precedent for future international agreements that should go through the prospective advice and consent process. Got withdrawal. The prospective advice and consent offers increased negotiating power, increased negotiating power brings the votes of the more senators because they wish to strike the U.S. principles the prospects of the negotiation power of the Senate and Senator Act senators can use prospective advice and consent to dissuade the president from the new treaties congressional executive agreements. 3, AI arms control coming now, but prospective advice and consent is key. Cartney and Thurman 18. And their control of the Senate and the House could facilitate cross-voting over require the Senate to majority vote in the chamber for an executive agreement. Clear indication the Congress will assert itself on arms control, likely the chairman of the push for constraint, but the new weapons for preventing cooperation between Trump and the Congress could pave way for arrangements. For the counterplan is key to future treaty making. It gives the Senate a long-term formal negotiating role. Got withdrawal the more important role the prospective advice and consent can play in the major multilateral treaty making. Its prospective advice and consent can strengthen the U.S. credibility of the bargaining table and gives the Senate formal role negotiating state to lead to interbranch interactions and more collaboration, less critical than they currently are. 2AC4 is arms race, AI arms race inevitable. 1, arms control agreements on tech work now and are possible. Belgian Fund 18. The reported after the death of nuclear arms control not premature. The business point the arms control is adaptive, flexible, and resilient. Arms control being reshaped by the emerging technology, hypersonic, lethal, autonomous weapon. The AI will not be over. They have to get the ability to get ahead of the trend of the manage the threats before they reach preemptive arms control. Giving to be filed on emerging tech. It's hard to imagine any state objecting the countries could build a framework for numbers of competence willing that can be created. Binding agreements hide the human state. We have exhausted our ability to achieve verifiable arms control agreements. We are not due to destabilizing arms control agreement. 2AC5 and 6 group them. They say the Senate won't do arms control. 1, cross-apply answers to 2AC3. 2 is prospective advice and consent appeals to the president. It incentivizes follow-on government from prospective advice and consent appeals to the president. The president should evaluate the increase in U.S. negotiating power that comes from the prospective advice and consent. Prospective advice and consent spares the president frustration of reaching a treaty after exhausting negotiation, only stymied by the Senate's failure to advise and consent to it. 2AC7 is no arms control because the U.S. lacks credibility. 1, the counterplan restores credibility. That's all above. 2, it proves say no to the case because the act is also some form of arms control. 2AC7 is no impact. 1, their evidence is only about China. It doesn't assume all the other countries. 2, it doesn't assume autonomous weapons, which we need regulations because those can go to war without being commanded to do so. 3, their evidence is about AI broadly, not about AI autonomous weapons system. 2AC8 is treaties fail. 1, the counterplan is the same content of the EA, just through a treaty. All their treaties bad evidence is about why the contents of treaties have historically included verification, not why that form of the treaty is bad, and if the counterplan is the same, it solves 100% of the case. 2, sufficiency framings. Treaties can solve enough of the app, and once enough credibility is restored, there's no impact of solving better. 3, treaties are the most durable commitment. New York RO 19. The treaties high legislative hurdles solve commitment problems, a strong legislative support of the place and treaty banks, ensure negotiation part of the U.S. is likely to cooperate longer than even administration change Senate or preferences are more stable than the preferences of the president because the Senate represents a broad consensus among the voting population, less sensitive to political shops. 4, inflexibility is solved by perspective advising consent, which signals future willingness to update and negotiate new treaties. 5, treaties are a unique signal of intention that communicates durability, non-compliance, and transparency. Roberts 4, by increasing the transparency, providing reliable information, safety, non-compliance, institutions, self-states, responsive, some aspects of treaties are ratified states with single intent to specialize in intent of the government in code of bargaining treaty, highlighting the importance and underscore the durability of the underlying problems that treaties raise with costs and non-compliance. Formal the public, the higher the reputational cost. 6, Article 2, approval process signals a deep and durable commitment. Cedar 2, obtaining legislative approval under Article 2 implies a more durable commitment to the year term of senator. First, lower term of the congressional executive agreement implies less durable commitment. 2/3 of the majority required shows deeper support for the treaty. 7, the treaty process is a costly signal. Pushing it through shows the world the president is determined to comply. Martin 5, U.S. president chooses form of the international agreements using Article 2 as costly and treaty start with the costly signal intent to comply with the. There's a treaty executive decision to account for the reaction of other states. Singly protects the high benefit agreements to take the form of treaties. Okay, AI arms race outweighs the case. Claire 18. A is a driven hyper-world risk in actual nuclear war between two states. The A powers C2 systems to launch atomic weapons and advanced gravity. When combined with the A system to launch enemy powers resources given such use and lose the process scenario, the power being planned to use launch a sequence first time impossible attack delegate. Launch of the radio machines it could remove impossible threat escalation of atomic weapons have no ability to step out from the brink of war.
9:31.
you say something, Paul? Oh, it's the same file. Yeah, they should say, I was thinking more for Russia, but I was thinking that, right? It's just this thing. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think this is true. Why is this true? Oh, yeah. Okay. 352. That's fine.
Let's stick my head out there. And if he's not done yet. Okay.
Where did you stop the prep at?
352.
Okay. The order is the strikes advantage, then the management advantage, then the North Korea, the NDDA, then the Iran DA, and then the treaties counterplay. Good.
Yes, room solves one clarifies escalation thresholds, decreases the ambiguity sufficient Additionally, to think twice before it's calculated as bench 2 spotlighting how this type of behavior was raised reaction also allows proportional response which prevents part of a runaway where that shape for 3 makes existing thematic channels effective repeated interactions between leaders are used to one another and present double EC substantially effective allows iterative modification of risk serving as our list or evidence none of their service about our specific mechanism. They do not cheat the plan. Verification is not key, which is our 1AC evidence. The list or evidence goes after, which is the recommendation we read in the 1AC. Lombaka says Lombaka doesn't say it says implicit norms fail, not the ones that we do. Channock is about a band failing, which is only the counterplan, not the F. Lombakis is about hard arms control. They concede no all concede no spillover. They take out the Irandia because we don't spill over to broad relations, and so the permutation would shield anything else. The EW strikes do cause extinction. Russia will strike early warning because of offense dominance, first mover in ambiguous norms. US perceives it as a first strike goes nuclear from flippant attacks that defense as assume that Donald Arbenov Miller clarifying escalation stops. Miscalc and aggressive, but the Schofields concerns have Cold War experience for Finch evidence. The stuff doesn't assume a single strike was enough and overcomes the monetary limitations. And also only Russia has to do so other states not being able to. Doesn't matter. Hypersonics, there's evidence to assume warhead ambiguity. They'll disclose it if we signal mutual vulnerability. So even if they say no to the arms control agreement, the signaling mutual vulnerability with China causes them to disclose warhead content of hypersonics. Those otherwise cause extinction. We first strike without knowing. Devolve to C3 to battlefield control causes theft to new terror. One detonation that kills the biosphere triggers daytime causes extinction. That's bigger. Whoever outweighs any data because 16,000 nuclear launch there. Impact their war evidence concludes terror is highly likely to be material habits for battlefield nuke evolution. Even if it's not generally likely, even one's enough. The counterplan motivates attacks. Dead hand means that even if the U.S. doesn't retaliate, it still causes extinction from 15,000 launches. The debris advantage Kessler now space is increasing collision rate. They've dropped the behavior norm solve new space because we regulate where stuff can get placed and how you move it. The Kessler causes disasters, goes nuclear because of the Indo-Pac nuclear war. Terrestrial wars go nuclear from satellite coverage. That's Johnson. Econ decline goes nuclear. That's Sunderland food. Also goes nuclear to divert with sharp evidence. So only a risk we solve any of this is enough to cause triad because we have some defense to the rest of their stuff. Norms prevent collisions by creating a code of conduct, which is our credible evidence. Would everyone agree to the Kessler guard is about dust particles, but says more dangerous stuff won't be solved now. The current evidence still says that there's right now. Ski to solve. Hubrick says debris collisions are an existential risk, and Stube says debris coming encouraged trajectory is unsustainable. The North Korea, yes, they solve behavioral solves. So even we solve high altitude debris stuff, which is what we said in crossing. So we solve all the debris producing implications of ASAT test, which solves both advantages. The only Russia war causing extinction. No other war has enough weapons to finish causing human extinction. The shred of a risk says enough. That's our con bear evidence. I'll finish it. Who have 90% of the world's weapons? The regional nuclear wars only lead to extinction. Only extinction was bigger than the conflict between the U.S. and Russia. Their card about AI doesn't say it causes actual human extinction. So only we control the direction of that. The Iran D8, their permutation shields and cuts off all actual transfers. The only thing left is arms control, which isn't enough. Conceded no spillover, so we don't embolden them or cause any relations increase. There's no judge kick because it requires 2 2ARs with different types of impact calculus. There's no parallel for it takes forever. Call 13 predictions. Parallel calculation strongly through false country that started down the nuclear path, found the road more difficult than I'm leading the majority reverse crossing all steps and have a parallel down this is that this word reason irrational security professional damage taken out of cost while that way potential benefits over a nuclear reversals has grown while the number of states in nation workers that decline the average time required to complete the program has increased in 17 years even as hardware knowledge and inertial base required for relevance expanded. Mark that card at expanded. Iran doesn't draw anyone in. Trauma of 1-5. Russia and China have little desire to get in predictable competence. I talk about World War III only Iran can only come out of itself. Russia benefits isolated Iran by Beijing and Russia have no appetite for competition. Russia doesn't have the slightest intent of getting involved in the world. He expressed support, said Putin of a rector of thinking that devices Russia mark that and advice where the link evidence doesn't say technological, it doesn't say any of the numbered shit in the way and the 2 and C the Russians have cooperation moderates Russia, which makes them less likely, which is our 1 and C evidence. Also doesn't say they do transfer because of arm control. The plan decreases dual use tech, which is the solvency argument they've dropped, so that solves the China stuff. That was crossing the sticky evidence is about NASA cooperation, which we don't do. The speaker evidence is about science funding, which we don't do. Moral authority is inevitable, or the permutation shield because it gets rid of everything else, and it's not about missile technological transfer, which is also the line I read in cross execution serve because it was in the one cross except the 1 and Z. Last. So the scholastic evidence is a list of thumpers like co-op and private actors. I'll insert the blue highlighting. I should get to do that because otherwise it's a moral hazard to read nonsensical arguments. The treaty comes out. Interdependence solves AI escalation, mutual investment is incentivized conflict, neutral dominance, open source nature of AI research ensures info sharing capabilities. Differences are marginalized or Sherman evidence from 2019. Confirmed do both shields and link because it looks like the Senate is strengthening an executive agreement. They have no card that's key for spillover. Senate authority is going alone. It wouldn't look like following on because it'd be immediate. More likely it looks like the Senate is goading Trump because he's less likely to support the plan. There's no reason meaningful prior is important for any audience. Also about being prior presidents doing things that are contrary to the goal of the treaty, not doing the same thing they could still veto, and or it would look like they could still veto what matters for the net benefit. The legal minutia doesn't matter for actual spillover. Permutation to the counterplan. I'll concede established means legislation means the act cannot be executive on its own. The only way it happens if the Senate passes. That would still be advice and consent of what the president negotiated permitted. The counterplan is a way the plan could have an executive agreement is likely to result but not mandated by the family. If you're conceding, you should reject positional competition. No one flows process perfectly. We don't speak in perfect legal jargon. Incentivizes leading questions that obviously clash. Only the plan is a stable locus of ground. That's a say. No, yes, no question. There's no sliding scale. So don't weigh the net benefit against part of the counterplan. The president would influence the result of the counterplan. The State Department also negotiates the counterplan. Otherwise, it would be Congress negotiation and a no card that solves the counterplan would not be updated annually. That's Starbucks, Groupon, McDonald's, get it really vetting norms, kind of planning alone can't ongoing crisis communication. They don't solve that. It was communicated to a cross. So it's not new. Here's more justified by new solvency evidence and the new Narocco evidence. The counterplan demands treaty ratification and kills solvency by forcing U.S. negotiators to water it down. Use a agreement which should take the form of SC like Inc. The Senate takes a hawkish stance on U.S. territory vis-a-vis China. The agreement negotiated will have to factor senators negotiation, keeping out and Senate imperative negotiation will be security of security most necessary, not a piece of an agenda. It's key to negotiating flexibility and speed color routine. Executive agreements allow flexibility when compared to treaties that can be negotiated in a timely manner without ratification. Give the U.S. total control across the timing scope of the rules identify major factors and each punishment will both strengthen and have will space for the U.S. Already unilaterally implemented TCBMs agreements and codified in Washington receivers bill treaties are one-offs that have to define everything from the start. It fails in space and only inform rules the road solves. Little 6-6. Your usual arms control solutions don't work as hard to define what you're controlling. Treaty is not practical nor does it really address what we need is any government that will establish rules for the road for space user habits of trust and cooperation. If they want to do AI arms control, they can just do it now. The coordinating evidence and state advice and control is key. No war. For example, teachers by the Department of Senate about wars and inevitable future company look more like those of the past. So whether lucky comes area or the problem dogs, it must still address the reality all its competitors. Million-man armies.
Where's that card, Marcus?
Million-man armies. There's a hyphenated million-man.
What's it? Let me just find it.
356.
Start.
Yep.
ICBMD, then the treaties. There might be some cards put wrong, so you still set them up.
Yeah, yeah.
But just be checking. Okay. Ready? Not convinced hard to say the permutation as well as the no spill of arguments. Their argument of no proliferation is not applied to artificial intelligence because it's about nuclear weapons, and we've read evidence that artificial intelligence be integrated into existing nuclear frameworks to cause war. The counterpoint at the top, the counterpoint decisively solves the entire case. They don't have a single piece of evidence indicting other these arguments that are treaties are bad, which is their only hope of winning a solvent. The counterpoint is an example of prospective advice case that has Senate negotiate a treaty prior to the president. The status quo is the president negotiates the treaty, then the Senate votes on the president ratify. The counterpoint shifts the steps of 1 and 2 to give the Senate a meaningful role in future negotiations in the future. Our evidence says that will galvanize Congress to pass future arms controls and treaties. Their first argument is independence solves AI. 1, they drop that this is about AI broadly, it's not about lethal weapons. Lethal autonomous weapons, fundamental thing. That's important because those use the loser pressures, which is demonstrated by the evidence that Ron read at the bottom of the 1 hour. They're likely to cross red lines. These are weapons that are fundamentally unaccountable. They can literally launch and initiate strikes on their own and make decisions on their own without any sort of human oversight or interaction. That means they could rationally calculate that it's better to nuclear first use someone and know better than the general, etc. And that is likely to cross red lines and cause miscalculations to prove that all their impact evidence. They cannot win that there are case always just by reading Russian extinction. Because we're in a card that said escalates to a nuclear war and they're turning to a Russian war is that a conflagration would occur. Our evidence is that this is exactly what would happen in the example of artificial intelligence. Russia and China would develop lethal autonomous weapons that could only be bad for everybody involved. It's irrelevant either way because the counterpoint solves the entirety of the case. So they have to win that this is literally zero, which they demonstrably cannot do. Now they say permutation to both. They have no cards in this whatsoever and read 6 fantastic ones. 1, the counterpoint, the permutation was an example of subsequent advice and consent, not prospective advice and consent. That cannot meaningfully galvanize Congress in any sort of because it merely ratifies the status quo, which already is an example of subsequent advice and consent. 2, the Galbraith evidence said that it denies a Senate meaningful negotiation. The executive agreement would say that Trump is the one who is negotiating first, who sets the terms of the debate, who decides what is to occur. Then Senate has just simply votes on it, and then Trump would ratify. That is fundamentally different than the Senate doing it first, which is them taking the reins of foreign policy as opposed to the president. 3, our other Galbraith evidence says that it's actually an example of 2 votes, which at best means it establishes parity between Congress and the president, and it's important that Congress has an oversight and has further role more than the president for the long-term future. 4, the Bradley card is also dropped. It says there's inherently a presumption towards subsequent advice and consent, which means if there's any murkiness about how the permutation works, then you should just presume that it's not likely to solve. They say it strengthens executive agreement. That is the exact point of the link argument, which that the president is the one who created the executive agreement in the first place, and the Congress is merely subservient to the president, to the presidential control. They say prior not key. They have no cardinals whatsoever. And we've read at least 7 of the Galbraith evidence says that the Senate having a prior role is necessary and is the foundation of the possibility of establishing any sort of arms control agreement because the executive branch has no interest in doing so. They say there still could be a veto that places. This is not a coherent argument whatsoever. The president they did not have any cards whatsoever. Trump would obviously ratify the agreement for the same reasons he'd pursue the plan. Our Galbraith evidence is the ones he also says that because Congress decisively took an action on the President Trump hand when he folded. Look, they don't have a single piece of evidence of this, so you cannot possibly let them blow this up. And this was basically one sentence. Next, the permutation of the counterpoint. 1, the permutation severs implementation. The counterpoint takes out of the president. They have not defined the counter defined the words national space policy. We have. It does not fiat the president implements the plan. It just says we just said he follows on, and they have no card saying the president won't do so. Severance is bad for negative ground. 2, our definition stuff. 2, should mean certain. They have to fiat implementation. The counterpoint does not fiat implementation, rather puts it up to vote. 3, NSP drop. They have to fiat the president next. The counterpoint picks out of it. 4, USFG means all 3 branches. They can't just be the Senate. They have to include in the president. 5, if you don't buy these definitions, that demonstrates they are not topical. If you think the permission of the counterpoint solves that you cannot possibly vote for them because they would have skewed negative ground to be outside of your jurisdiction to vote for non-topical form. 6, legislation still has to include the president. The argument can see this is irrelevant because the president has to sign the bill. The affirmative does establish a piece of legislation, but the president is the one who's involved in negotiating. They've described the affirmative as the executive agreement. So it means the counterpoint doesn't feel so severance. 7, this is not positional competition. We have not only defined words in the plan, but also words from the we've defined words in the plan, which demonstrates that it is facially topical. Next, they say the treaty self-proper. The framing for all this stuff is that even if they win, the treaties are bad in the abstract. They have no reason why it does not apply for the affirmative because we did the exact same content as the affirmative in this case. Every card they've read about, there's some issues with the treaty process historically, but those were completely contingent about the implementation of the law of the sea, about the implementation of different arms control agreements. Not in the case of where we have a counterpoint that does the content of the affirmative. They've defined this concept to be no verification, no punishment, no mechanism, etc. The counterpoint does exactly that. It's just the retreating mechanism, which demonstrates that none of their evidence applies whatsoever. Second, they drop sufficiency framing, even if you think that Russia and China somehow don't like the fact that it's treaty. That's irrelevant because they'll still say yes for the same reasons that they said yes to the affirmative. 3, durability. Our New York evidence says there's massive legislative hurdles and implies the United States will cooperate in the future if we do with the retreaty because senatorial preferences are more stable in the presidency since the presidency can shift every 4 years, but the senatorial preferences are baked in and speak to the broader foreign policy trajectory of the country. This demonstrates that it's the thing that is more credible and is in fact ironclad. 4, it solves the inflexibility argument because it will also be modified and because it has the same content of the affirmative. 5, it's a unique signal because there's a political cost of non-compliance because if the United States were not to agree with it, that'd be going against Congress as well as the courts enforcing it, given that it's a self-executing treaty. That's the Robertson CTR evidence. Then 6, it's also massively time incentive and is a costly signal to ignore it. That's the Martin evidence. Their evidence is all terrible. First, their Krepin card. It says that treaties are bad because they're not feasible or verifiable or have a penalty. The counterpoint obviously solves the feasibility through fiat, but verifiability and the penalty is irrelevant because the counterpoint does the same rules as the affirmative, which means this is not an argument from their Hughes evidence says that they read in the 1 AR says that senators are hawkish. But first, gut check. Trump is already the one who is hawkish in the status quo, which means there's not a risk of office. And second, the fiat obviously solves this because the counterpoint mandates that senators would vote for, which demonstrates that they would not be hawkish or perceived as hawkish, and they'd certainly be likely to fall in the future. Their next card is about flexibility, but we already answered the above. That can be updated in the future. The next card is that treaties are a one-off that have to define everything in the start. This is just fundamentally not true because that's suspended because they have to do it. Next, they say they can do AI now. When the counterpoint mobilizes the Senate, they aren't pursuing anything now because they don't think they can take a leadership role. Only we have read predictive evidence that if they get this power in their hands, they'll push for new arms control. That's 1 in our Galbraith on 2AC3. 2, Congress is warming to arms control over next-gen weaponry. The 1 in our Courtney evidence says the new chairman of Foreign Relations Committee and the Arms Control Committee that says they're warming to it. They're impact events. They read 2 lines. That means they cannot access this. It's brand new. Strike it off your flow. They said AI irrelevant. And we also mentioned above. Prospective advice to consent is better. Galbraith 12. Must have to increase the negotiating power of the Senate instead of trying to delay. President advice gives the prompt action by finding genuine external deadline. Senate must have for final negotiating conference and switch delay while it can spend more political capital to do so. Yeah, that's good. You said that correctly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me get that one process.
So,
What are we at?
352.
Just set that over here.
Let me know when you all put that card.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Okay.
Yep.
Ready?
Yep. We good? Alright. Only Russian war can cause extinction. Hypersonics cause first strikes from both sides and devolution of command and control. It also causes nuclear terror that immediately triggers dead hand, global retaliation, and nuclear war. The 2&R conceded that only a nuclear conflagration between the United States and Russia can kill literally everybody. We read Colton Barrett evidence that the only scenario for an absolute nuclear war that kills literally everyone on Earth is that. The 1AR instructed you to scour the flow because our evidence says arsenal size means that is the only thing that can kill everyone. It is a fundamentally distinct impact scenario because we can always repopulate. Only a war between the United States and Russia can literally end life, which means that you should frame the entire debate through that. It flips all of the sufficiency framing arguments. You should treat a 1% solvency deficit as the full weight of the counterplan solving literally nothing because any risk of that argument absolutely outweighs, and the 2&R doesn't extend a single piece of impact events, which means if we make a dent to the net benefit, that should be sufficient to vote affirmative. That means they've conceded that completely insulated from everything else in the debate, the process of negotiating the plan would allow the United States to declare mutual vulnerability to China and Russia, which would clarify hypersonic payloads. The Senate will not make that concession. The Hughes evidence is the only evidence describing the plan. It is explicitly comparative on how an incident in space agreement would be negotiated. It explicitly compares treaties to executive agreements and says giving the Senate input causes them to be more hawkish. They'll castigate our allies, demand unreasonable security concessions, and they won't do operational disclosure. All of that means that there's no scenario where we would ever declare mutual vulnerability. No Republican senator would ever allow that to happen. The counterplan is not the same rules as the affirmative. The plan initiates negotiations over behavioral norms. The counterplan results in a different conclusion from those negotiations because it allows the Senate to stick their hawkish noses in everything, which guarantees it does not solve any of these security concessions that we have said are key. It also causes external interference. You have to keep them out. They will do things like demand an ASAT ban, restrict BMD tests, or a whole bunch of other things that you know Russia and China will not accept as per their case evidence. Only our evidence says that executive negotiators are given the flexibility to make the deal work. It also cannot be updated annually, which is a conceded solvency deficit in the 2&R. The plan requires a meeting every year to update the agreement, which is explained when we're doing all the compliance stuff in the 1AR, that the whole point is some non-compliance is inevitable. Updating the agreement to clarify what red lanes are is what makes it stabilizing, which means all of those arguments are offense against the counterplan because even if it does the initial deal, it can't be updated. The 2&R evidence that says it's fast doesn't answer the argument because even if the initial deal is fast, you obviously can't revise the treaty every year, and there's absolutely no basis for believing the GOP clusterfuck is capable of doing that. These generic treaty cards do not apply to space, norms, or code of conduct, which means the global frame for how you should read sufficiency framing is as an apt argument for how you interpret generic treaty evidence against solvency evidence that specifies an executive agreement, which we have been saying since the 2AC. Permutation due to the counterplan. It's a way the app could be implemented. The Senate would pass the treaty and the executive would implement that via the State Department. Established means legislation, which means the affirmative must go through Congress and not be an executive agreement. They said that NSP was the president. We strategically conceded a conflicting argument from the 1&R that establishing a policy requires a policy. That means Congress will initiate the process of legislation. The 2&R argue about requiring the presidential signature was smart, but not backed up by evidence. Here is their entire card. Modern dictionaries follow Johnson by defining established as enact a law or statute permanently. The strategic consequence of reading conflicting definitions should be that the F gets to concede one. NSP cannot be initiated by the president. It must also be established by Congress. They dropped the 1AR argument that the counterplan would also use executive implementation to do the agreement through the State Department. If it doesn't, then the counterplan does not solve because no one would implement or negotiate the treaty, which just proves another link to all of the solvency arguments I did above. The USFG, meaning all three branches, is consistent with executive implementation of a senatorial treaty. None of the words in the plan mean the app has to be an executive agreement, which means at best they are relying on prospects. The 2&R just said they want positional competition, but didn't answer that it's bad because it incentivizes leading questions that no one flows perfectly and more written legal answers. That means that only arguments they can win for competition are NSP and the USFG, and we have conceded in a definition of established that proves Congress must be the one that does the plan. They've conceded no judge kick. So if we win permutation, you do the counterplan, you should vote AF on presumption because they've not defended an alteration to the status quo. If you conclude that it is a picked that of the executive, then say no obviously zeros the counter plan because they've not read a piece of evidence that he would agree, and they don't fiat that process. They do not solve the internal net benefit. The 2R is exceedingly light on whether or not the counter plan spills over to AI arms control. There's no evidence in the debate that is coming now, or that the Senate would do it. Their evidence doesn't give them a say in any future arms control agreement either, because of how the text of the counter plan is written, which means that even if they give them influence here, there's not a good spillover card. It solves anything else. The Courtney evidence says there's precedent now, which would take out the net benefit, but it's also about nukes and says it's either impossible or inevitable because there's incentive now, but Congress isn't doing it. The Galbraith evidence says it offers the Senate the possibility of acting, which is not an answer and not a spillover warrant. Their evidence says there could be an agreement. The one in RF those treaties solve says nobody is pushing them now, but that we need them, which only proves that there's not incentive to do any of this shit now, and it's just ludicrous to believe that a GOP Congress is going to pursue any of that stuff. AI does not solve it. It does not cause extinction. They've conceded that institutional shock absorbers created by clarifying red lines mean there's no scenario for escalation. Their evidence does not say it would cause a war with Russia. The first one says it might cause conflict. The second one says it could go nuclear, but the scenario for it going nuclear is AI's introduction into already existing conventional war, which they've conceded we solve and is absolutely inevitable now, and it's not about Russia. They've conceded mutual investment disincentivizes the deployment of AI weapons, and open source nature means everyone has the weapon, so you can't meaningfully alter balance of power, which is the Sherman evidence. Nations also choose competitive advantage and economic incentives over weaponizing them, which answers the motive to go to war.